Today, I'm going to be working on a 2002 MR2 Spyder.
The truth.
So today's video, I'm going to be putting in this gauge cluster with a bunch of different gauges I'll be putting on. The first gauge I got is right in this box, so let's go ahead and get it open. So as you can see, this one is the oil pressure gauge I'm going to be putting on. This one will just be the first gauge of 3 that I'll be doing. And because all the other gauge clusters on the MR2 are white, I'm going to be swapping out the white face for it. But I think I'm going to keep the black ring around it, just the white face. Now I do have an air-fuel ratio gauge coming as well. And then the third one will be a boost gauge. But I'm not getting that until I actually get the turbo set up. This is the part number for the oil pressure gauge with the black background. This is the part number for the white background. This is the gauge cluster I got from Monkey Wrench Racing. This is their part number. I'm not sure if they still make this part or not, but if they do, that would be the part number you're going to look up. So inside the box for the oil pressure gauge, it's got some wire connectors. It's got the wire with connections on it. One of these is for the back of the pressure sensor. The other one is for the back of the actual gauge itself. And then there's a few extra wires. We're going to figure out where those land here in just a little bit. But first, I'm going to go ahead and swap this for the white background. Alright, so this one with the white ring and the white backgrounds actually comes with a few extra ones. It comes with the fuel pressure, and it's reading in PSI, or if you flip them over, they're reading in bar as well. That one's bar on that side. But, so we're going to be using the oil, and we're going to be running it at PSI. Like I said, I'm not going to use my silver ring. I'm going to use the black ring. But I do want the white background just so it matches the gauges on the MR2. But to swap it out, it's just got 3 little screws we're going to be taking out. And then this whole face right here separates from the rest of the cluster. So let's go ahead and take these 3 out really quick. And this will be the same on all the other AEM gauges as well. Other brand gauges probably be similar. I don't know if they'd be the exact same, but probably very similar on how to swap it out.
Nah, is the king.
Alright, now it's going to have a little glass face. This is the part with the little gauges and lights and everything. We're just going to swap this face over, if I can get it to separate. There it goes. Like I said, we're going to run oil PSI. So I'm just going to swap it like this, line up all the holes. You can see the holes in the glass piece. Line it up. Slide it down over this. And then on the back of this guy, it's got 3 holes right here, and that's where the screws line up at. And it's also got these little notches in the same spot, so you can see them on this side as well. But line up the holes and just get it back on there. Alright, now we have a white background instead of the black background. Next, I'm going to get this gauge mounted in this cluster right here. I'm just going to get it right on there. I don't know which order I'm going to want these in. I might put oil in the middle, do like air-fuel ratio over here, and then I'm going to probably boost over here. That's just kind of my preference. You'll set up as your own preference and which gauges you want exactly. But for now, I'm going to run oil pressure right here in this one. So we're going to take off these little brass ends on this guy. I may have to hollow out the hole just a little bit, because it's not quite wanting to sit down there like I want it to, but it's close. So what I might do is just use like a file. I'm just going to file it out just a bit, just so this guy fits in there a bit better. So yeah, even looking at it this way, you can see that the hole is just slightly smaller than what I need it to be. I don't know if it's all three are going to be like that. This one's pretty close, but this one's about the same. It's just slightly smaller than what it needs to be. So I'll probably hollow each one of these holes out really quick, just with a file, just to clean them up, just so these gauges fit in there nice. But once we do, then we'll put this backer on, and then use our little brass fittings to snug it up. Alright, so I was using my file. It's kind of like a half-rounded one. I don't know how well you can see it. But just kind of running in and out of these holes. So right now I'm just going to run the oil right in this middle hole. So I hollowed it out enough that it'll fit. I'm going to go ahead and test fit it in these two other holes as well, just to kind of hollow them out, because I know the gauge size is going to be all the same for all three. I've got a air-fuel ratio gauge coming for that third one there, and this one's going to be my boost pressure whenever I finally get around to getting a turbo for this car. So for right now, this one's probably going to remain open. I may just get the gauge and just wait to finish wiring it up whenever the turbo comes in, but either way, I'm going to get all three set up for available gauges. But yeah, it's just, you know, patience with the file. Just going to hollow it out, test fitting it, hollowing it out, test fitting it. But yeah, soon have all three hollowed out enough that I can get gauges in all three. Alright, got it fitting in the third hole now too. Alright, there we go. Now, I know the AEM gauge is going to fit in all three of these gauge clusters. So, I'm going to put the oil pressure right back in the middle, and we're going to put the bracket on the back side of this thing. Now, with this bracket style, it's pretty easy. It's just this little bar. Fits right on there like that, and then it's got these two gold-colored nuts that screw right down on here to hold it in place. Now, you don't have to make them super tight, but just snug them up so it doesn't go anywhere. And it's important to make sure you got your gauge facing the right way as well. You don't want it like upside down or right angled or whatever. Mine is a little bit off, so I think I'm going to play with it a little bit more. Alright, I tweaked it just a little bit. Now I got it right where I want it. And I snugged up these guys both pretty good. Just pretty much hand tight. Alright, so first we're going to open up this little guy. And you can see it props itself up. There's these two tabs down inside here. I could try and get a flashlight on them. There's a tab right here, and there's a tab on this side as well. We're going to need to pop those tabs inward. So what we're going to use is a really tiny screwdriver. Just kind of get underneath. There's a little lip. Just pop them out. And there's one. Mostly I'm going to use a little pry tool. Might help as well. And once both these tabs are popped into the middle, we're just going to kind of raise it up and wiggle this guy out, and the whole thing's going to come right out of there. Alright, so now I'm going to jack up the whole car, and I'm going to be draining out the oil. Alright, so next I gotta remove my under tray. So it's a bunch of bolts and look like Allen keys holding this thing in. So let's go ahead and get this thing all the way off. Alright, now I got my oil pan all set up. Go ahead and crack my drain plug loose. Now, granted, you don't have to take it all out to put in the sensor, but I do need to change my oil regardless, so do it all in one shot. And yeah, I'm going to be changing the filter out with the frame filter as well. There's the part number if you need one as well. Keep in mind, this is for the 2ZZ motor. It may or may not be the same for a 1ZZ. Alright, now before I put a new filter on, I'm going to be taking this sensor off. So I'm just going to unplug it from this side. I'm going to unscrew it from here, and we're going to be putting in a T and the new pressure sensor right up in this area. So you'll see what I'm talking about. But first, let's get this little guy unplugged. Maybe if I can do it one-handed. All right, so I got the plug off. I'm just kind of squeezed it and popped it right off there. Now we got to get that sensor off. I found that the 15/16 open-ended wrench fits on there just perfectly. So now we just gotta apply some force and get it off. I'll probably put the camera down. I may set it up at a different angle to record myself, but if you don't see it, you'll definitely see it off the car here in just a minute.
A few moments later.
All right, so I've got my old sensor right here. I've got the new one that I'm gonna be installing. I've got a T-fitting, a 1/8 T-fitting, and then a 1/8 NPT fitting. So pretty much you got to go with the NPT fitting because it's the same style as the old sensor, and that's what we're going to be screwing into the car. The T fitting is going to fit into it. I want to put the old sensor on the back like this. Move it more to the middle of the screen for you. And then the new sensor is going to go in like this. I'm going to leave the new sensor out for the time being. I'm going to put these three in line. I'm going to put some thread sealant on there, and then I'm going to install it on the car. After it's already in, then I'll put this one on. You don't want to use too much thread sealant because you don't want to like gooping up and then clogging up whatever the sensor might read. So just a light bead around each one of the fitting or the threads for the fittings, and then we'll install them all together. And be sure to tighten them up as well. Now I'm going to put my old pressure switch right back here. Just to kind of keep everything in the same line. I'll do it this way. And then, like I said, whenever I get that put in, I'll put the new pressure switch in. But I want to make sure it's going to be a good angle, that it's not going to get in the way of anything else. One minute. No.
Nah, is the king.
I don't need you anymore. You better walk out of there.
All right, let's go put this in the spot where I took this guy out, right behind the filter there. And then we'll figure out where this guy's gonna go.
I don't need you anymore. You better walk out of that door.
Now before you put this little guy in there, just make sure you got enough clearance before you go ahead and stick it all the way in. Don't forget to plug your sensor back in too. Alright, so I got a brand new oil filter on here too. Let's go top off our oil. Alright, now that we got it topped off with oil and we got a new filter on, the sensor is all tightened up down there. we're going to go ahead and we're going to start doing the fun part of running wires from the gauge itself all the way back to the sensor. Alright, so now we're going to start running the wire. Hopefully this will be long enough to reach from the oil pressure sensor, which is right underneath here, up and around and to the front where I'm going to put the gauge cluster at, right underneath the windshield there. If not, we're going to have to cut the wires and splice in an extension and all that kind of good stuff. So we'll see how far we can get. But let's go ahead and plug this end into our sensor underneath the car.
I don't need you anymore. You better walk out of that door. I don't need you anymore.
As you can see, I've got it running up over the engine mount right here, clearing the throw out for the clutch, which is right back up in there. Got it going up over some hoses and lines, and then we're gonna go through. There's a hole in the firewall right up there by the air filter. So let's go topside and see how well we can fish that through. I'm gonna go ahead and put some wire loom on this as well, just to kind of protect it from any dirt and debris and anything else from the underside of the car.
You better walk out of that door.
Alright, as you saw, we had the wire running right along the bottom over here. The firewall hole we need to get through is right down here. I don't know how well you can even be able to see it, but it's right down here behind the battery and the air filter. So I'm going to go ahead and take the battery off. Obviously, my two connections, the hold down post, get the battery up out of there. And then I'm going to get that air filter out of the way, which you'll see here in just a second. And then we'll have access to that hole in the firewall. Alright, you can see it a bit better down in there, but we're still going to move this air filter that we can get our hands down in there and access that hole in the firewall. Alright, now I'm going to try and grab it from the top side here. If not, I'll fish it up more from the bottom and then grab it, and we're going to run it right down in there where the hole in the firewall is. Alright, so it was a bit of a pain to reach my arm down in there, but I was able to fish it all the way up. So I'm going to go ahead and take off those panels that are on the inside of the car. That way I can see where I'm poking through at and pull it through that way. So let's go ahead and start taking panels off on the inside. Alright, to run the wires through the firewall, we're going to need access through down here. So I'm going to be taking off this panel. I'm going to take off this door here. It's just a bunch of 10mm bolts down inside here. I'm going to take off this panel as well, just so I can access where that firewall's at. And then we're going to take off this door seal all the way along in here to run the wires up through there underneath the dash and then up. I have a stand right here, so I can only open the door this far. So if you're going to do the same thing, make sure you got plenty of room. But I should have enough to get this up. I'll get my little pry tool under there, pop that up. But I'm going to start with getting these 10mm bolts out of here so I can get this door off and this under panel off, and then I'll start working on this one and the door, bottom door jamb. Alright, so next I'm going to be taking out this little panel right here and that panel right there, and then I should have full access to where that hole in the firewall comes through. All right, so right here is the other side of the firewall where we're going to be pulling our wire through here in just a second. Alright, now as you're pulling from the inside of the car, you want to make sure you leave yourself a bit of slack in here. I'm going to pull it a little bit tighter, but you don't want to leave too much slack where this just flops around all the time inside the engine bay, and you want as much as you can inside the car. Now, I'm going to be having a hard time taking out my door jamb seal, pretty much this seal on the driver's side there, just because of this shelving is so close to that door. I don't have a whole lot of room to work with, but it should be relatively easy. You should just be able to get up underneath it and just kind of pop it up. This one's not coming too well, but I can feel the tabs underneath. Oh, I can hear them. There it goes. See, just like that. So we're just going to be doing that to the driver's side. And then we're going to be taking out this one as well. Again, on the driver's side, which I think it's just a couple of these little pop tabs. And then this panel should pretty much come right off. I don't think there's anything else on here. Nothing I can feel. So yeah, it should be just these two pop tabs, and this should kind of move. It's going to have the seatbelt running through it. Well, you can see that. My brightness is not great. There it goes. It'll have the seatbelt running through it, so you just kind of be able to move it out of the way. But yeah, we'll get that out of the way on the driver's side there, and we're going to run our wire down and along. It should come up right behind the steering wheel area. Alright, so now I can run my wire down through here, right along the door seal there. And then we're going to be coming up into here, which I'll probably be taking off this plastic piece as well. That way I can feed it up and underneath the dash. Now that I got it pulled through in the car, I'm going to run the wire loom all the way up to the end of it and then cut it off with a pair of side cutters. And then I'm going to go underneath and I'm going to zip tie the wire to a couple spots down there as well and snip the end of the zip ties off. That way they're not just dangling around doing whatever, and it keeps the wire nice and secured underneath there. Sadly, as far as the wire goes, is right here, about halfway down the door. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this wire, I'm going to take it back maybe a foot or so, I'm going to cut it, I'm going to splice in a lot more wire. We're going to finish running it up underneath and come up to where the gauges are going to be at, and then I'll splice it back in and tuck the excess back underneath there. But that way I don't run too much wire or anything like that. I have a decent gauge of how much I need. But yeah, I'm going to cut it right about here, and then we're going to be splicing in some wire. Looks like it is only, it's a black, red, and a green. So only 3 wires we've got to splice together on each end. So let's go ahead and get those wires cut. Now because I already have the wire run back through here, and it pretty much drops down right behind the seat here, I'm going to go ahead and put in all these plastic panels back in. That way, one, I don't forget where they all go, and two, it clears up some room in my garage.
Hey, the king!
Alright, now before we get too far along, let's go ahead and put our air filter back on the air pipe, and we're going to put the battery back in as well. So I can get my driver's door to open all the way, I'm going to go ahead and get the MR2 all the way back down on the ground. But before I do that, I'm going to go ahead and put the under tray back on, and then we'll lower it all the way. Alright, now I can open this door so much more and access the fuse box behind here as well. I did take the plate off already, but it just kind of got a little latch right there. You just kind of pry it out and it pops right open. But yeah, you'll need access to your fuse box here in just a minute. But first, we're going to splice these wires with the new ones I got, run it up under the dash, and then we're going to come up here, which we're going to have to put a hole back up in here. So I'm going to be pulling this rubber mat up and then making a hole. And then what we're going to do is we're going to shine a flashlight from underneath up just to see where it's coming through at. And we'll probably be shining a light from the top side as well, just so I can see from underneath where I'm going to be running these wires up at to get up in here. Alright, so I turned the light off for now, but I was shining it through this hole right here. And you can actually see it coming up from underneath here. So I think what I'm going to do is I'll probably at this back corner, the best I can, I'm going to try and put a hole right back there and make it big enough so I can run the oil pressure gauge. I've got my air fuel ratio gauge that's going to be going in, and then a boost gauge whenever I finally get boost on this car. But I want to have the ability to run all the wires through that hole, so I'm going to make sure the hole's big enough for when I get all the wires, I can run them all through there. So, and I am going to clean up the leftover glue that's on here as well. Just use like my little scraper or something and clean that up. Because when we put the gauge cluster, oh, I'll grab it, it's right down here. Put the gauge cluster on here. I'm just going to use some double-sided tape just to hold it down for now. I may try and Dremel this out just so I can put the latch in, so it latches like it did before, and then I can unlatch. But for now, I'm just going to double-sided tape to hold it in place. And yeah, that's what it'll look like. I kept the white face with the black ring just so it kind of matches my regular gauges and the knobs down here as well. So yeah, that's the look I'm going for. And then again, boost gauge is going to go here whenever I get that in. But let's go ahead and put the hole down here so we can start running some wires. And then we're going to bring them up from over here, which I still need to splice, up underneath, and then up here. I went up to 1/2 inch because that's the size of my wire loom, so I wanted to be able to poke out through the hole just a little bit and then run the wire straight through it all the way down to where the door is at. Alright, so here's the foot weld. You can see the flashlight shining right on the steering column there, but it's coming from up there. I don't know how well you can see on the camera, but we definitely got a good hole going through there, and that's from coming in right up there. So let's go ahead and fish some wires through. We're going to feed them down. I'm going to run them along. I think I'm going to take up this piece as well. And yep, there's a nut back there. Alright, so I got to take off the nut back there. Get this plastic piece out, and then we're going to feed it up over, or actually down this way, and then right through here, and then we're going to splice it in here in just a second. Alright, much better. Now we can have better access running the wires through here, and then getting them up over this way to our new hole. Alright, so I'm going to start by running some 14 gauge wire down through my hole, and then what I'll probably do is shine the light, and then try and find it up underneath, pull it through, and then I'm going to come back through with the wire loom and feed it directly over the wire all the way down, and then I'll run the other wires through the loom as well. I think the stock wire gauge is a 16, but I couldn't find anything that small, so I just upgraded to a 14. So it won't hurt it to be a slight size bigger. It shouldn't have any issues with it. If anything, it's a little bit better because the wire can handle a little bit more amperage, but it's just to a gauge, so it doesn't do a whole lot. But let's go ahead and start feeding this wire through the hole, down the dash, and then I'm going to find it and pull it through the rest of the way. Alright, so I'm pretty close to everything, so I don't know how much you're going to be able to see. I've got my wire coming down, got my HVAC controls over here, and then this, what you're looking at, is the other side of where my steering column is at, so like where the steering wheel is. I think I'm going to run the wire up through here, and then come over. Again, I don't know how much you can actually see, because it's really dark, but then come out right here where my arm's at. Alright, so I pulled plenty of excess over here to have it route where I want to, and then connect to my existing wires. Now, up here, I'm going to unspool a bit more of this, and I'm going to leave myself some room to play with. Maybe like a foot or so to play with up here. And I'm going to go ahead and cut this, and then what I'm going to do next... Okay, I can do what it wants. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to go ahead and start feeding the loom through that hole, down all the wire, and then all the way out to probably about right there. So where I'll have it pretty much bare wire up to here. I don't really want to run the loom through here because I think it's too bulky, and that door plastic panel thing isn't going to fit back on there. Yes, that is a technical name for it. But let's go ahead and get that cut, and then I'm going to start feeding the loom through. Alright, well I tried to feed the loom through that hole, and I guess it's just slightly too big. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to feed it up from the bottom side all the way up to that hole, and then I'm just going to kind of jam it through the hole just a bit, just kind of hold it in place, and then that way the rest of the wire is chilling in the loom down here. So I've got it kind of poking through up there, and I've run the loom all up in here. It goes right underneath the steering right here. I know it's really hard to see, but it's hard to get up under there too. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to cut the other two wires and go ahead and feed them down through this as well. That way this just gives it a channel to work through. And yeah, have all three wires run, and then we're going to start splicing them in. I know I've said I'm going to splice it in like 4 times now, but eventually I'll get to splicing them in. Alright, so that took a lot longer than I wanted it to, but I've got it running down through here, right along underneath where the where the steering column's at, then comes out right here. I'm going to tuck it back this way, and then I'm going to go ahead and connect it up through there. But before I do that, I'm actually going to go ahead and run this wire for the power wires through this loom as well, down over here, and then we're going to bring it up near the fuse box over there. So let's go ahead and route this through here and down that way.
Hey, it's the king!
Now I am leaving a decent amount of wire up here, just so if I have to take this whole gauge cluster out, I can easily move it and then unhook the little white clip and get the whole thing out of there. Because if I did it like where it's just the exact right amount, I won't have a whole lot of room to take the gauge cluster out and do anything behind there. Alright, so I've got it pulled through the loom up here. It's kind of hard to see, but it's up that way. Anyway, comes down here. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to run it across in the loom, and then I'm going to pop it out of the loom right about here, just so I can come across and come up this way to meet up with my fuse box. Alright, so these just came in the mail, and they're actually pretty cool. I saw another YouTuber use them on his WRX, and so I wanted to try it out for myself as well. But what you do is you pull out a fuse, you stick this guy in its place, and then you can put in whatever size fuse you need to right inside here, and then you splice your wire in. So it comes with a couple different size fuses. I believe those are 7.5s and 10s if I'm not mistaken, but I'll double check them here in a little bit. But I want to use one of these for our oil pressure sensor, so we can keep running whatever fuse I'm going to pull, and then run the fuse for our oil pressure sensor as well. So my mistake, these ones are 10 amp and these one are 20 amps. And of course I'll be linking these down in the description below. Alright, so I already took my cover off. It just pretty much, you stick a screwdriver right in here and it pops open. You pull it right out. But there's your interior fuse panel. If you look at the back of this thing, it's got what each one of these fuses does. Now, I've already done the legwork, and I'm going to be using this 7.5 amp fuse for the gauge cluster right here. I used my meter, and I put it on it. When the key is not on, I get 0 volts. When the key is on, I get 12 volts DC. From that fuse, which is going to be not this bottom one, but the second one up right there. So we're going to go ahead and pull that one, and then we're going to be sticking in our little fuse adapter here. And what it's going to do is going to sit in that 7.5 spot, and then we get to plug a different size fuse right in here. I'll probably step it up to about a 10 amp fuse and make sure it can hold. For these gauges, it says use a 5 amp. So if we're already rocking a 7.5, I'm going to step it up another 2.5, and it should be able to handle the current going through there without blowing that 10 amp fuse. But I don't want to go too high, because then you could burn something up in the process. If anything, I may step it up to a 15, but that'll be the absolute max I want to put it. But let's go ahead and pull our 7.5 out of here. We're going to stick this guy in its place. Alright, so this is me from the future. I was mistaken in that last clip you just saw. I originally ran just this 10 amp fuse, but when I started the car, all the gauges would not come on. You still need to run the 7.5 amp fuse in the rear here, along with this fuse to power the gauges. What I'm probably going to do is probably swap this 10 amp for a 5 amp for the gauge cluster. That way, if anything does blow, it doesn't fry all my wiring and the gauge itself. It'll blow the fuse first. But just a heads up, you're going to have to run both fuses whenever you use this style of fuse adapter. Anyway, back to the video. And then in just a minute, after we tap this wire into our existing wire down here, somewhere, there it is, then we'll go ahead and plug this guy in with our new fuse. Alright, so now I'm going to take my red wire, which is poking out right there, and I'm going to crimp it onto this guy. But first, I'm going to put on a bit of heat shrink, just to kind of help seal things up really well. And now I'm going to crimp it, slide the heat shrink back over, and then heat it up, just so keep any kind of moisture or anything out of this connection right here. Now we're going to run our red wire back up this way to get to our little fuse box area. Alright, so I stuck a 10 amp in there. Probably should have put the 10 amp in before I plugged this thing into the slot, just because it was a bit hard to pinch it down on there. But either case, it's in there now. So now we're going to go back under here, find that grouping of wires. And so our brown and our white would go to our standalone ECU. So for right now, I'm not going to worry about those, but we want our black wire. There it is, the one in the middle. We want that one to run to a ground. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that and I'm going to ground it to one of these bolts down here. I found one a second ago. Right here. I'm going to take this bolt out. I'm going to throw an eyelet on the end of that black wire, and we're just going to ground it right there. Alright, so my original black wire up here was a bit too short, so I went ahead and made an extension wire. So it's just got a connection on this end. I put an eyelet on this end where the bolt goes. I put some heat shrink on it. I got some more on here just for the other end. There you go, there's my heat shrink. I got this heat shrink on here for this end. It's whipping around. But I'm going to go ahead and connect it to that black wire that's existing there. I'm going to feed it through and then put it back in that bolt hole. That way we can ground that wire right there. Alright, now that I got this ground wire tight, and I mean it's loose enough I can play with it here, but the bolt itself is tight. I'm going to be throwing some zip ties up underneath here just to hold the wire loom in place all the way up to basically this point right here. I'll be cutting the wire loom about right here. I'm just going to run bare wires. I'm just going to run bare wires all the way down to here where I meet up with the other end of this wire cabling. Just because I think the wire loom is going to be too big to fit in this slot. So I'm just going to run the bare wires up, connect them to here. So, first things first, I'm going to get these zip ties on real quick, and then I'll show you me doing all this.
Hey, it's the king!
Do the ground wire. I'm going to do the black and the red wire just the same, but I'm going to stagger them. So this black wire, I'm going to actually run it to just about the end over here, and then the red one I'm going to do right in the middle. All three of the little red crimps are not in the same spot. They're kind of staggered out. That way it's not as bulky in one spot. They're kind of spaced. Alright, now that all this wire is connected and tucked up out of the way, I'm going to go ahead and put the body panels back on, just kind of cover things up, and I'm going to put the one back on up in there as well. Alright, we're almost done. Now we just got to connect these three wires to the three wires that I had pulled through. And then we'll be ready to connect our little white connector to the back of our gauge and get everything in there. Now I'm basically just going to be doing what I did a minute ago with taking the butt connectors, attaching them to these, and then stripping these guys back a little bit, connecting them to the corresponding wires. That's why I used the red, black, and the green again with all these wires. But yeah, we'll get them all connected, throw some heat shrink on them, and yeah, should be ready to plug this guy in the back of our gauge. before we get too far along, I am going to plug this in to the back of my gauge, and then we're going to turn the ignition on and make sure that it lights up like it should. And then we'll go ahead and start the car, make sure we're actually getting oil pressure reading from this as well. So let's go ahead and get our gauge cluster thing and plug her in. Alright, so far so good. We are getting 2 PSI. So let's go ahead and start the car and see what happens. Alright, as the oil warms up, it will drop a bit. But we'll see what our average running oil pressure is here in just a little bit. Alright, so it seems to be settling at the high 30s, like 37, 38 PSI. I'm pretty happy with that. It does obviously go up whenever I get on the throttle, but it comes right back to the high 30s. So I'm going to go ahead and shut it off for now. Alright, now finally I am going to take some of this two-sided tape and I'm going to run it. Move that out of the way. I'm going to run it down this side, across the front here, and down that side. And basically just have this thing sit right like that in here. I did zip tie this little grouping of wires back up in here just to keep them together, so I got to cut the tail off that zip tie still. But for now, I'm just going to two-sided tape pretty much down like that.
Hey, the king!
So getting this thing to sit down in there, I did notice these corners right here and right over here. It's got a small gap. I'll probably have to file that down a little bit just to make it fit a bit better. But for now, it'll be fine. I've got the 3M double-sided tape along the three sides just to kind of hold everything in place while I drive and all that kind of good stuff. I would like to Dremel out the little notch up in here so I can reuse the little latch thing that's in here. I've still got it on the original glove box lid, so I'd like to put it on here, but if it doesn't happen, I'll just keep using 3M tape and hold it down. And don't forget to put the cover back on your little fuse box as well. So I've already got all the wiring and stuff for the air-fuel ratio gauge, but I just need to get it bung welded on the exhaust, and then I'm literally just going to run the wires up the same way, put it into a different fuse up there, and then run it up to the back of that gauge on the far right. But like I said, I don't think I'm going to include it in this video, just so I can get this video out, showing you guys how to at least run gauges and wire them up and everything, and go from there. Well, I hope this video helped. If you have any questions or comments, leave them down in the comment section below, and I'll try and answer them as soon as I can. If you liked any of the background music in this video, please check out the artist's SoundCloud. Link is in the description.